This is episode 4 of the Kings Creek podcast. Well then, in that case, let's get rolling. Jesse, I'm going to have you introduce our guest, since you know him just a little bit better than I do.
Wow. We're going right into the podcast.
Yeah, man. You got to get it started.
I'm still swallowing my Red Bull. Yeah, I'm excited. You know, we have kind of got somewhat of a plan, you know, with what a method to the madness. And our next guest, I probably got to know, scarily enough, probably 10 years, if not maybe just a smidge more than that. I was always extremely intimidated by him. And he always, you know, he's kind of got this, you know, he's a dude's dude. That's what I like. I like, you know,
Yeah.
I like that. I don't know. I think he's just an awesome guy. But aside from that, getting to know him more and you know, his family and, you know, the best part of him, he'll tell you, is his wife. And that's kind of common with all of us here. Maybe not me, but y'all. Obviously, it's definitely glaring with me. But Lane Lowery, and I always get this wrong. Are we calling you our executive pastor right now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, cool. I want to make sure that's correct. But he is an executive pastor at our humble church, Warren. And, you know, I've been trying to figure out a way to get him on here for a while. He was probably one of my number one picks other than pastor, because I feel like if there's anybody that can give you some low-key, nonchalant, deep wisdom, it's him. And he grew up very similar to the way I did, minus the drama, but just from an athletic background. And then realized that the world didn't revolve around a bat and ball or football or a sport, but he just decided to live his life for a higher power. And that's, to me, you know, with a passion for men. And that's probably one of the things I admire most is, you know, somebody that's humble. And he is a absolute humble servant, and I look up to him. So, Lane Lowery.
Well, you're very kind, Jesse. I appreciate that very much. I love and appreciate you very, very, very much. You've been a great friend over the years, and I'm honored to be sitting in this room with you and Mike.
Thank you. I guess just kind of welcome to the Kings Creek podcast. Just to give you a quick rundown, the purpose of the show is to equip listeners with tools and the confidence necessary to connect themselves just with people that they maybe wouldn't normally connect with. Okay. And I don't know how much you know about the story of Kings Creek, but that's kind of what it was. It was, you know, they didn't put their name on things. It was just a logo, and a logo was enough to get people to talk. So that was something that was really cool. Speaking of equipping people with things, I think we got a gift bag for you. I'm going to let you open. Just kind of let us know what you think.
Fantastic.
And don't worry, nothing's going to pop out of it. But Lane is probably one of the snazziest dressing guys at our church.
I realized that going to Warren that my outfits are not par.
If you're going to be around this guy, you better tighten up.
Yeah.
That is
on point, my friend.
That one's not released yet. You are I don't have it. You are the absolute first person to have that. It's one of our new polos, and it looks like you. So I think it's going to be
very, very much.
It's going to be a good, nice little spring look to it.
Absolutely. So. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, in that sense, I just kind of want to briefly go over what we're going to talk about today, just so the listeners kind of can track, you know, what we're going to be speaking on. And really, it comes down to the question of what makes a man. And so we want to talk about masculinity, the things and characteristics of manhood and men, the role that faith plays in masculinity, and then kind of to close things up in something that we find really important. It's a event that Kings Creek has been the title sponsor of, I think, since its inception, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right.
And so we're going to talk about the man-to-man conference and see if we can't get a few more people to come tag along.
Great.
Awesome. All right. I guess just something funny to kind of kick this off. We were talking yesterday about like things that men do. They're just odd odd things. One of them is leaving, and let me know if you're guilty of this. After you make a sandwich, you leave the knife like hanging over the sink just in case for whatever reason you might want to make another one. You ever done that?
Absolutely. Who doesn't?
I don't know why that's.
I've never met somebody that won't do that.
And it wasn't something that I was taught. It was just like, I'm going to do this and, maybe. That's just like ingrained in men.
Of course.
It's cavemen. I mean,
Yeah.
I think they laid the stick.
Yep.
They propped the stick up against something back in the day, and it just has never left us.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if it's mayonnaise, peanut butter, mustard. It doesn't matter what it is. It is. I was going to ask, do you making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich? And obviously, I don't want you guys to claim that you don't eat them and don't love them. But when you're making it, is it like a knife for the peanut butter and a spoon for the jelly?
What are you talking about?
Or are you just
I'm knifing the whole thing.
intermixing it all? Dude, you just have not got a wife that's got onto you.
Oh, no. This because the spoon you can actually get more of the jelly, and then obviously you butter the first with the peanut butter with the knife, and then you go with the spoon. Because if you take the knife and put it in the jelly, then you're in trouble.
Oh, it's bad news.
Man,
You got to use the old corner of the bread to get all of it out of the spoon.
Well, we must have lost that in our generation, man, because that's not, I have no idea.
And let me ask you this: do you peanut butter and jelly both pieces of bread, or just
No.
the one? Really?
I'm peanut butter one side, jelly on the other, specifically red raspberry jelly with the seeds. That's my thing.
I'm kind of do the old peanut butter on both pieces and then jelly on both pieces and kind of smooth it out. Because I'm a pro like peanut butter and a taste of jelly. And to me, it's like I can eat it on the go a lot better than having jelly coming all over the place.
Well, and it's best consumed about 9:30 p.m.
For sure. When you don't have enough milk to make a bowl of cereal.
Boom.
Because I'm going to tell you, I'll eat some Frosted. It doesn't matter what kind of cereal it is. The worse for you, it's an underrated dinner.
Another job of men, now that we're talking about sandwiches, is we are the ones that eat the butt of the bread 100% of the time.
I have to be in the
feel
right
like that.
mode. And it has to be the right kind of sandwich, too.
Half jelly, half peanut butter. Squish it,
If you
make a hot
squish it
dog.
together, I can do that.
It's game over.
It's like a peanut butter and jelly Hot Pocket.
Yeah.
It's kind of what it looks like.
All right, leaving the peanut butter and jelly alone, another thing that we do is we carry all the groceries into the house in one trip, or the least amount of trips as possible.
It's a competition, isn't it?
Yeah.
No question.
That's something that, again, we just did. I don't know if it was born out of laziness or what, but like I'll fit about 17 bags on a hand.
I mean, your finger's
Somehow
longer
elbow
than you
the-
think it is.
True.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have big hands by any means, but I'm a 12 bagger. I can promise you that.
12
Each
bags.
hand. The only thing messes me up is bottled water.
Yeah.
Throws a wrench in the whole thing. But I'll 12 bag it. Just stumble in and just ruin half the groceries. Just trying to get it in. But that's my goal.
Yeah. You got a bag of broccoli just beating against your knee on the way in.
Oh, it's just it does not matter what happens to it from the back of the truck to the door.
That's so funny. Yeah. Men, we just do some weird things.
I can't even. I will tell you this though. I get in trouble, and I'm probably going to get in trouble for saying, not in trouble, but kind of. I'm not allowed to put the grocery bags on the counter.
What?
That is a no-go.
Your floor?
It's got to go to the floor.
Man.
I'm going to tell you, Shanique will die if she comes in and I've got all those dirty bags all over the counter. I can't put the boxes that come in, Amazon, whoever that, for some reason at our house, I'm sure maybe at y'all's too, we have a collection of brown cardboard boxes every day when I get home.
Yep.
If that's on the counter when she gets home, it's ball game. But that's the way she is about the groceries. She'd rather, you're going to bend over and pick them up.
Yeah. That's,
Every item. No, I'm putting them on the counter if she's not there.
That's so funny.
Anyway.
all right. I guess to bring it into a little bit more serious of a topic now.
That's serious.
No, it is serious. Yeah, I guess it's serious, but it's like, you know what I'm saying?
I'm teasing.
All right. I guess like using imagery, when I say what makes a man, some might say, at least a manly man, it's someone that wears camo with a big beard, drinks whiskey after hard days of blue collar work. While sure that can be, I think that dismisses a lot of other men and good men. So, from your perspective, what makes a man?
That's a great question. I think a man is a person who takes responsibility for his actions, who takes responsibility for his family, who doesn't shirk or shy away from leading. I think a man is humble. The Bible uses a word called meek, and some people think that means weakness, but it's not. Meekness is just power or strength under control. So I think a man is a person who can control his feelings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that there's a Jordan Peterson. I refer to him a lot. Do you know who Jordan Peterson is? He has this whole thing on how it's almost like a man's duty to be dangerous, quote unquote, or like violent, but have control over that.
Sure.
Versus, like, it's better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it, sort of thing.
Well,
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think that, I have probably, if you could have asked me to define that over the last 30 years, it'd be interesting to see how maturity changes your definition. How, I'm going to use a big biblical term, not intentionally, but how sanctification changes my definition.
Yeah.
Because I can promise you, if I had to list right now what I feel like a man is, it'd be vastly different than what I grew up thinking a man was. And that's kind of an area that I wanted to kind of set in a little bit, not redundantly, but just for a minute, because I feel like that definition of a man is presented to us one way. What's best for us is another way. And then kind of what we're doing is a third way. You know what I mean? Sure. It's one of those things where it's kind of like, this is what's, and then technically what is the true definition could possibly even be a fourth thing. That varies a little bit. And that's not even taken into consideration what would a woman's opinion, if we ask them what a man is. I think that they say that as a young lady, you want to marry a man that is a lot like your father. I think that's kind of something that you hear a lot. I don't know if that's, if they can back that up.
I would think most fathers would disagree and would probably try to say someone that's better than me. I would hope.
Oh, I think so. But I think that if you asked, I think mom and daughter would probably agree, but I think dad and brother would think different.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, that's kind of like just natural, but then what a wife, or I say a wife, but what a woman thinks about when she's looking for that Prince Charming, that to me, that's a whole nother definition of the term man. Mm-hmm. And so it's interesting to me. I was just going to get y'all's take on that, that, if we feel like we know what the definition is, what prevents that from being common knowledge, and why isn't everybody on the same page? What are the things that separate us in our opinions?
Well, I think about if I had to come up with that definition in my pre-redeemed self, there's no question. It would be kind of like the man you described, Mike. Mm-hmm. Rough, basically looking out for himself, get to the top no matter who he has to step on to get there, But like you said, then praise God, I got saved, and then that sanctification process. So you're exactly right. And I was saved at 17, but there's been a whole sanctification process through now. I'll be 58 coming up in May, and I look back at it now as a dad and a granddad, and so I think the definition does or has the opportunity to change and shift. I hope it does as I've matured in my faith, for sure.
Right.
What's interesting too is you said you were saved at 17. That's right around the time I was too. And luckily enough, that's kind of at the same time you're kind of discerning for yourself what is a man. Mm-hmm. Like you've seen, hopefully growing up, a father in the home or some sort of masculine figure, and you're kind of reconciling, especially as a new believer, is this the man I want to be, or is the person I see in church the kind of man I want to be? And it's, you're trying to reconcile that and determine for yourself, who am I as a man?
Right. And I think you are determining that. I think that based on a lot of your actions, before you know it, you're trying to your point, discern that, but you're also creating that in the meantime. Before you know it, you could look back and think, man, how in the world did I get to where I'm at right now? I got a lot of chiseling, I got to chisel a bunch of this stuff away because I've created in my mind what I felt like. Also, I should say this, if I'm trying to define what a man is, and I was thinking in the eyes or in the mind of, attracting a woman versus, an employer versus a coach, we're all going to kind of change that a little bit. But I think all of this gets back, at least in my mind, it gets back to, even though that's going to change and evolve and there's different things that are going to be important at different times, the foundational man is the thing that I think that we really need to define. I think that is a foundational man. And I'm not talking about just somebody that was born with the hardware, but a foundational man, from an ideals perspective.
So in a generalized sense, you're asking what are the common characteristics of a man?
Right.
What would you say?
Honesty, integrity. I think about, a man who is, we said, humble. Humility is a huge part and piece of that. Leader, someone who will take their God-given responsibility to lead and do that, and not, we talked about this earlier, Jesse, about often we've sadly in our society, men have abdicated their role and responsibility to their wives, and so I think a man is a guy who's a leader, and that doesn't have to be that you're some great leader where you're leading a ton of other folks, but you're just leading yourself. You're are taking responsibility. You're willing to hold yourself accountable. So, yeah.
Jesse, what do you think?
I think that's, gosh, it's such a tough one, but I agree. I think that, we've been talking about at the latest men's forum about being a follower. And I think that was something that was so due.
Yeah.
A conversation to have about what it means to be a good follower. And to me, a provider, you've got to know, I guess the easiest way for me to put it is if I was under the impression that my wife didn't feel like, she should feel her safest with me, to know that regardless of what happens, I'm going to be there to support her. I got to be a lover. I've got to love her in the way she needs to be loved. She's got to see me raise my children in the manner that she knows God's called us to raise our children. Right. All of that, it's kind of like the characteristics and how you behave and all of the actions speak louder to me than, it's easy to say that, I lead my household. It takes about 5 minutes of somebody visiting to figure out who leads the household. And if it's just done on pure visuals, about 5% of men are leading their households, I feel like, visually. Because as you alluded to when we were talking earlier, we won't give up a recliner to anybody, but we will give up every God-given responsibility a man is supposed to take on himself and put it on our wives. And not only that, ridicule them on how they perform those duties. And to me, there is nothing more, I don't know if de-manning is a term.
He's saying de-manning because he can't say, what is the word?
I'm talking about there's nothing that will take away your man card to me than not only just somebody that I know or feel like is not pulling their weight, but then is going to double down and criticize. And if you mentor anybody, and we've been fortunate where we've done that, that to me is probably the thing that stands out the most is, when you have men that ridicule their spouse to me, publicly ridiculing your spouse in any manner, I don't think is justified. However, in this situation, you would be surprised at how many people will lay all the responsibility on the wife and then literally get mad about how they're doing things. But I don't know. It's just shocking to me though that it happens as much as it does. But you're not going to use my cup at the house. You're not going to sit in my recliner, and this is my side of the bed, and my job's to do this and do that, and so I think that the meek conversation, is something that I had to learn at a young age. That I thought I had to be tough. Growing up small, I kind of fought my way through life. I mean, there's no other way to put it. I'd fight a chainsaw. It didn't matter because when you're small, you're expected to get whipped. So when you didn't get whipped, then you became something. But that kind of started the pecking order. And I think we were going to get into some of that too, some of the way society's impression of a man and what society pushes on us has changed dramatically from the days of watching the Lone Ranger. Right. And we even talked about just simply games that we used to play. And it was glaring to me. Mike said, playing Army, getting out there doing that. And I said, oh, well, we can't play Cowboys and Indians anymore because we can't call them that. So it's like, if you just look back, I mean, everything has been changed so much. But Warden, Beaver Cleaver, and, all of that. And I understand that things are going to evolve through time. But to me, the foundational responsibility of the man should never. That's something that we've got the instruction manual. I don't understand why it's so easy to change that.
Yeah. Yeah, I just, real quickly, I kind of want to piggyback off when you said being a follower. When we were last week at the men's forum, I saw something I wrote in my Bible, and it was basically, we were talking about something similar, and I said for a man, it's so, we want to jump in and start driving the Cadillac as soon as possible. And I remember feeling like that, like, oh, I'm ready to go, especially when I was early on in my journey as being a Christian. And I had to remind myself, like, hey, man, take a seat in the back of the Cadillac and figure out how it's supposed to be driven first before you get in there and get in a wreck, so to speak. You know what I'm saying?
There's great wisdom in that, Mike. I totally agree with you.
Yeah. All right. So then now to bring it back to kind of what Jesse was saying, many of the things that we did as boys growing up that kind of formed you into a man seem to be disappearing. What's missing from manhood today?
When you say what's missing from manhood,
yeah, I feel like there's just things that were done that aren't done anymore. Like he was saying, like just going outside playing Army or whatever, and maybe you got hurt or something like that. I just feel like there's things that are missing. Maybe it's how we were treated and how we were disciplined in a sense. Sure, maybe that's an example. It's not the one thing. I'm just saying. Like there's things that are missing within masculinity.
Well, and Jesse alluded to it. I think the whole PC culture, everything's going to be politically correct. I think that's definitely done down, if you will, trying to raise boys. And I do think, all the technology is a wonderful tool and an incredible gift. Sitting in front of a TV playing, video games all day. That wasn't even a thing when I was a kid. Literally you came home, changed clothes, and you went out and played until dark. And I think just some of our success as humans have, I think, watered down some of those items that are now missing. And it's always easy to say, "Oh, the good old days." Well, these are good days too, but I do think we have to be more intentional. Just because we didn't have the distractions back when I was a kid, or even when my kids were being raised, I didn't have the cell phone wasn't a thing. Yeah, and then when it became a thing, it was just literally a phone. Now all the distractions of social media and all that, I just believe it's such a distraction. And I think kids who have that, and most all of them do, and that's a whole other conversation at some point when we talk about raising kids in a digital age. Man, actually, we're going to have a conference about that at the church in August because it's such a deal. I do think that kids are just distracted with the wrong things. I was talking to a coach in our area who says it's becoming harder and harder to get kids to come out to participate in sports because they just want to get home and they want to either play video games or they want to get on their social media. And man, that's kind of scary.
Yeah, and I think you kind of bring it up, and I see it too. is the whole keeping up with the Joneses mentality. Social media has definitely done that.
Yeah.
And people are so fearful of what others will think about them.
Yep.
So whether it's like you not wanting your kid to have a cell phone and a kid says, well, then people are going to think we're weird. And you're like, okay, well, then people think we're weird. I don't care. This is just how we're going to do things.
And Mike, you just said it, another definition of man is taking a stand. It's going against the flow. A daggum dead fish can flow downstream. It takes a live fish to swim upstream. And I think our society needs men who are willing to go against the stream of society, because good gravy, you don't have to look very far to see it. It's, right now society calls right wrong and wrong right. And it's Scripture is replete. It says that in these end days, those things are going to be happening. And so at some point, man, and I think that's why we're trying to do man-to-man conference. That's why we do men's forum. That's why we do momentum every Thursday, because we're trying to say, look, we're going to draw a line in the sand, and we're not going to go along with that anymore. No, we're not going to do that. And so I'm grateful for a church and a pastor who leads us in that way.
Yeah. What's crazy is, 10 years ago, that wouldn't be a counterculture thing to say.
Right.
And now it is.
How about it?
One of the things that sorry, Jesse, you want to say something?
I did want to say this. One thing that I do think that's pretty interesting is if you go back to the 80s, late 70s, 80s, when I grew up, and maybe 7 to 10 years earlier than that, Lane, when you grew up, I can remember times that our dads, they had to teach and they had to raise us against things of the previous generation, or, they still had that same mentality as when they were raised. And so they had to kind of call an audible, and they had to adjust, and they had to change their way of thinking, but that's when men, to me, were a lot stronger. And I feel like because these men, a lot of men have just been, and I'm going to attempt to say the word for the first time, demasculinized or something like that.
Yeah.
Since that has taken place, I feel like culture's going kind of, and society's kind of going in the direction that I feel like it was going to go in anyway. We've got a cheat book. We kind of got the manual. We know how story's going to end. But I feel like because these men have been just changed, they just don't have any fight in them anymore. And so they're not intentional. I mean, Melissa and I welcomed the conversations about social media. We welcomed cell phone conversations and digital conversations because there was a teaching moment there that we chose to use that as a method to teach valuable lessons that we knew were going to come up.
Yeah.
I wish I was smart enough to be the originator of that idea, but I wasn't. But I'm going to tell you this though, I was totally cool with being the enforcer.
Yeah.
And that I feel like is where I wasn't worried about making friends with my kids. I knew that if I did what I was called to do, what I was supposed to do, there was going to come a time we were going to butt heads, but that they're going to come back around.
Yeah.
But it takes time. But you have to be, I was so focused on, and still am. I mean, don't think it's harder for me to raise adults and parent adults. That's harder than anything I've ever experienced. But thinking from that standpoint, I feel like a lot of men and dads just don't have the fight in them. They just don't want to argue. And mom, we've already established the fact mom's beat. She's wore out. She's wore every hat.
Yeah.
That she can wear. So she's wore out. And I feel like that's why I guess that we're so passionate about getting to the men.
Yeah.
Because they're the ones that can make the difference. And there's a lot more fight in these guys that are out there right now. They just don't know it, but there's a lot more fight in them. You just have to value that end. Think about it. And we talk about this a lot too, that you've got 18 to 20 years with your kids. After that is visitation. That's all it is.
Yeah.
I mean, you're lucky if they're local. But it's visitation. And we are, for the most part, I feel like society's given up on raising those kids.
Oh, yeah.
They're speeding them through school, through college. Mm-hmm. I don't know what for, because I'm going to tell you, when they hit the real world, it's so hard for a young man to be ready at 21, 2 years old. We're trying to get them out there at 18 to 20.
Yeah.
You know, and then we complain about having immature people in the workplace. My goodness, they're not immature. They're just their age. I mean, we had to have them early. And so I say that just to say that I feel like there are several glaring things I think that we're going to talk about, hopefully, that show that it is, maybe it's a little bit more simple of a solution to the problem. We're making it real complex because we live in that society that feels like there has to be so much data to support everything that we do. I'm going to tell you, there was a lot of times I got my butt kicked with zero data to prove why I needed to. And I'm talking about it worked.
Yeah.
Just in case, well, I know you didn't do nothing wrong, but, you know, just you'll think next time. Don't even associate yourself with those people doing that. You know, and that's the part that now, you know, I'm going to have deep facts or who I got to justify to somebody, you know, and that's a whole other conversation. But, you know, I think that plays a big role.
I just want to really quickly touch on how now you're considered lucky if your kids come to you with a problem versus trying to figure it out on their own and kind of hiding it from their parents. Like, you can count yourself lucky that they said, hey, Dad, this is what was said at school today. What do we think about this? What do you think about this? Like, that's rare. But I think the major thing, in my opinion, the major thing men are missing now is purpose.
Yeah.
There's such a lack of, and this is kind of coming into the faith aspect, is there's such a lack of, you know, what am I called to do? What's my purpose? Okay, do I just start a family, have some kids, work a 9 to 5 because that's what society does and that's what we've been doing for generations? No, what am I supposed to do and why am I supposed to do it? I think every man should have an answer to that.
Don't you think you probably, and if you had to rank some of the questions that are commonly asked, not just from men, but women as well, but we're talking about the men here, but that desire to know God's will for their life.
Sure.
I mean, that's something that I hear so much.
I still struggle with it.
But to me, it seems like it's such a easy, once you get to that point in your life to where you understand what that is and understanding that it changes. Yeah. But ultimately we all have there's one responsibility for everybody. But I think it's interesting, that topic that you bring that up, because it is a very self-centered approach to things. It's all about what I.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's just my opinion. I mean, I think it defines itself.
It's interesting. It is kind of like a me-centric perspective. So
yeah. And is it good enough anymore?
Something to chew on.
Is the 9 to 5 a good enough life for somebody? I mean, that guy that's working 80 hours a week and on the railroad, nice little cush 9 to 5 that's a retreat.
Right.
So is it just our dissatisfaction? I mean,
yeah. And I think a lot of people, real quickly, we're kind of getting off topic here, but I think real quickly, people associate 9 to 5. It's not the hours 9 to 5. Mm-hmm. It's like the type of job that's 9 to 5. That's really what we're talking about when you say 9 to 5. It's sitting in a cubicle like everybody else, sitting at a desk doing medial tasks that is probably going to be replaced in 10 years anyway.
Right.
But all right, I want to bring into the faith part of this. What does faith say about masculinity? Or what role does faith have in manhood?
Well, I mean, Scripture goes back to when you're in Genesis, God created them, male and female, He created them. Mm-hmm. And God created man for a purpose, and He created women, a woman for a purpose as well. And I think, Scripture and God, He set the standard. He made the standard. It is what it is. God created men and He created women, and He created us to know Him and to make Him known. And as we've already uncovered today, society is fighting tooth and nail to change that. And sadly, it looks like they're winning. But like Jesse said, we read the back of the book. We win in the end. And so I'm grateful for that. But I think the God's book's there. It's his book on marriage. It's his book on raising kids. It's all there. He's already given it to us. We've tried to complicate it. It's as we've defined today, it's recognizing who I am, recognizing who God is first, and then who I am in Christ.
Right. So it comes down to human arrogance.
Well, you and I talked yesterday when we were preparing for this, something that we just brought up. It seems like to me that the only way that, and I'll just call it society, has in convincing us as humans to continue following the direction is all of that. It has to be based on a lack of knowledge on our part. The more we remove, and people are going to think that this is just a Bible thumping, and that's obviously there's going to be some of that. But if you don't have that foundation,
right,
speaking to somebody that does not have that relationship with the Lord, I can see where it would be a lot easier to persuade and to get into their mind. But if you are a professing believer, I struggle the most with why you would personally struggle with what's going on, because there's always that foundation. But the more you remove, and I guess to circle back, that's why I feel like, they can't say the Pledge of Allegiance anymore. Obviously we don't want to go down that rabbit trail of, the Bible being taken out of schools but the only way to defeat us, you got to remove that, because you've got to eliminate, by all means, that knowledge. Because when you finally do, have that experience in your life, well, then now all of a sudden they have no power. They're not going to tell me something that is going to compromise that in my mind. And so I'm probably the worst subject for them, because I don't, it is what it is. I still love everybody, even though they can create people as different as they want to create people, but we celebrate those differences, as we talked about earlier, and we love those differences. It's what makes us individuals. But I feel like a lot of that it goes back to that. The more all of that's been removed, now kind of the pool that they're operating from is just the pool's getting larger. I think they've always had the same intention from day one. The intention's been there. But now we're just giving them more of a stronghold by removing a lot of this.
Yeah, and I think
a lot of our biblical teaching.
I think the more you remove it too, it'll just become more apparent of how poor of a decision that is. Like, I hate to say it because it gets overused all the time, and I'm sure you've heard of it, is good men create good times create weak men create bad times, and the cycle continues. I hate saying it, but it is so true. And the people, what's frustrating is the good times create men that are weak, quote unquote, but they don't recognize that they're in good times. So they have no perspective of what a bad time is or how to deal with it when that time comes. And for some reason we lose that in I guess it's really parenting. It's raising the next generations. We keep losing it. And it's like that game of telephone where eventually, I don't know when it ends, but it's something completely different that was initially what started it. So
it is odd to me too, if you look back after you get a little bit older. I mean, it's obvious when you're in your 20s, you just haven't had the opportunity to live enough life to see how, a bad thing can evolve into a really, kind of a harmless thing becomes harmful. And just talking about being a man, probably one of the things that I look at that is destroying more men and more marriages and relationships is no secret. Pornography is something that is just, you want to talk about a pandemic, that a pandemic term does not even scratch the surface when you look at these, statistics and what have you. But I can remember that what evolved from I don't want to use the brand, but a pornographic magazine from the past, might have been a mansion at some point. But anyway, And that, to see where we have progressed to today, to me, there's not many more visible, examples of just the evolution and the progression of that, and what it is in turn doing now to men and to society. But what started as a harmless little magazine, that it ain't no big deal.
Yeah.
And so they got that little bitty, grasp on, it's just turned into something that is, who'd have thought, if your parents would have told you this is going to destroy your life back in 1977, we'd have looked at them like they were crazy. What are you talking about? Yeah. But you see now how that evil can just progress.
And what's crazy is I feel like it's like the silent killer, like the thing that nobody knows is kind of happening. I just heard a stat that said pornography is like the average age that someone's introduced to pornography now is in elementary school.
Yeah, I heard 10.
Elementary school. That's crazy.
Did you say elementary?
What did I say? Elementary, whatever.
Okay. I thought this was a language barrier we had. So I just wanted to.
It's that north or south.
It's part of my job to point out these odd pronunciations so we can address them and get it out of the way, because I would have been focused on elementary the whole time. And it's one of the things I love about you.
I like documentaries too.
Okay.
There we go.
So, but yeah,
how tragic is that?
It is.
Everybody knows an elementary school kid.
Yeah.
It's just mind-boggling to think that, I'm like growing up, like, sure, there's whispers of things, but you don't see it. It's only kind of living in your imagination. Yeah. And you haven't seen enough to kind of really form what that would look like. Most of the time you're just playing kickball and you're trying to get one last basket in before the teacher yells at you for not coming in for recess quick enough, So it's insane.
It's just too easily accessible.
Yeah.
I can be on my Fox News app and, just a couple scrolls away and there's something there that I've got to, oh my goodness, how'd that get there? So obviously the enemy is wise and he is coming at us from every different angle and every different direction. Didn't have to deal with that as a kid. Obviously, right. Social media wasn't even a thing. My kids, they were young during the internet, but yeah, it's epidemic, as you said, Jesse.
And I'm going to tell you, I'll be the first to admit I am probably one of the top 10 most grateful human beings that I didn't have to deal with that.
Me too.
It is with the personality that I grew up having and it.
But the conversations that we got to have, and I love what you said, Jesse. You weren't afraid to talk to your kids about that. I think that's the key. Once again, what does dad do? He leads and he calls out and he puts parameters and those types of things. And we have to, because society certainly isn't going to. So God's given us a stewardship over our families, over our kids, and we've got to rise up to that. And we can't. Again, there's a great. Moms are phenomenal. And we need that support as well. But we got to lead, man, and we got to support her, and we got to just draw those lines in the sand.
And I think that's the most frustrating part to me, looking at different situations from the outside. Now that we've kind of been through that season. A mom doesn't have the ability to do what she's designed to do to the level that she wants to do it because she has got to do so much.
Right.
A mom can't be that nurturer because she's got to be the disciplinarian. She's got to be the chauffeur. She's got to be how are you so who is teaching your kids what it looks like to nurture? For goodness sakes, where are they seeing you and your wife? That spousal relationship, if it's never displayed to them, where are they learning that?
Right.
Oh, from pornography? Well, that's a healthy situation to be in.
Well, they're learning something. It's
right.
Just,
right.
Hopefully it's the right thing.
That's exactly right. And, I'm always so hesitant, especially when we do or have conversations like this, because I know that whatever percent of the listeners are sitting back thinking that these little church boys are trying to teach it. We deal with men, grown men. And I know a lot of grown men that are just tired of it. Yeah. And so I'm not saying that we're trying to lead this. This is something that's been going on. Mm-hmm. But I do feel like it's something that by us having this conversation and just getting the conversation started, I can't help but think that some men are just looking for the opportunity to get started. They just really don't know how. I mean, looking back at you'd send your kid into a culture shock if you just decided to do an about face and change everything. So how do we take some practical steps to start righting the ship?
Yeah. The man conference, that's a perfect segue. Before we get to that, I want to say how scary it is. We were talking about technology, and it's like, yeah, when you give a phone to a kid, you're kind of concerned about what you're giving them access to, just kind of like an unrestricted phone. But I think another thing that's not really thought of is who you're now giving access to your child.
Exactly.
You have no idea like how your kid's giving your phone number out or their phone number out and who they're giving it to. And next thing you know, they're texting some dude who's 40 years older than them, and they don't understand like how predatory that is. And so I just think that's another thing is you got to remember who you're giving access to your child through a cell phone.
If you humanize that, I was talking to somebody that was trying to convince me that, for one, that we were abusive because our kids never got cell phones until they were physically driving in an automobile by themselves. And then I was just absolutely terrified. So they, but it wasn't a smart, it was just a conversation piece. We were ridiculed because, and I'll tell you the byproduct of that. And again, this is not saying, oh, send your kids to me where we have all the answers, but a byproduct. Both of our kids today, 21 and 23, don't sleep with their phones in their rooms. They charge them out. We had this charging station in our family room.
That's smart.
Because I was scared to death.
Yeah.
But I'm going to tell you the worst thing that I probably did was I still brought mine into my bedroom. And I regret that to this day. But they go off to college, it's habitual at that point.
Yeah.
They just don't have to have it by their bed.
That's great.
And I'm now looking back on some of the things that I've learned and heard about, and I don't know if any of these things are actually true.
Yeah. You talking about like the medical part of it?
No, I'm just talking about like you hear of all of the access that people have and the listening abilities. And
that kind of goes back to what I'm saying, like who you're giving access to
right
on the other end of the phone. But all right, let's bring it to man. This kind of, I feel like one of the main reasons we brought Lane here. Why don't you kind of give us the story of the man-to-man conference and what it's all about?
Sure. Well, for a number of years, matter of fact, Jesse was a part of this. We started a men's outdoor conference. Or I say we. They started a men's outdoor conference. He and Adam Harris and some others, and they did that for a number of years and had great success with it. And then it just grew to the place where it would no longer would fit on the Augusta campus. And so I remember back in, I think it's probably 2016, 2017, I went to lunch with Jesse and Adam, and we started talking about, well, what could we do, on the campus that would really attract men, because the Augusta Outdoor Expo would really attract it. It wasn't just men. Obviously, it was the main focus, but families came, which was a great thing. It was a great tool. But then we started talking about, well, what could we do if we weren't going to continue to do that, or they were going to do that off site? We talked about a men's conference, and so we just began, throwing some ideas back and forth and getting talking about sponsorships. This was totally outside of kind of my purview, but obviously Jesse and Adam and some of the others were very astute at that. So we just began talking about it in 2017, and we said, what we're going to do, we're going to launch one in 2018. Of course, Dr. McKinley, our senior pastor, was behind it, and our desire was to provide a 2-day event, a Friday night and a Saturday event where we could invite men from all across the CSRA to come and hear some really good, godly men speak on authentic manhood. And we wanted to get obviously some pastors that can come and teach the word, but then also we wanted to try to get some guys that people knew, some NFL and MLB stars, that are men walking with the Lord, that obviously name recognition would draw people there, but the ultimate goal would be for them to hear the gospel. And then it could be a place where men could be discipled and then challenged to continue to that walk with the Lord even after the conference. So it's hard to believe we had our first conference back in 2018.
Wow. Yeah, I see you got a list there of some of the names that have been there. If you just want to kind of go over some of the ones that you really struck a chord with you and that you remember.
Absolutely. You know, obviously some of these names are well known in especially in our Southern Baptist circles or church culture circles. But in our very first conference, we had Dr. Jack Graham, who's the senior pastor at Prestonwood Baptist Church, probably one of, if not the largest church in America. Pastor Charles Goodman, who was right here, is a pastor here in the Augusta area. Darryl Strawberry, Major League Baseball player, who had just a tremendous testimony. God has used that man in just many, many ways. Quite a story, was an incredible baseball star. Of course, had some struggles with substance abuse, but God's really has done a work in his life. Football player in the NFL named Corey Redding was there that first conference as well, who, again, just gave a powerful testimony of what life is like in the NFL. And then Pastor Reese Stenner. But throughout the years, we've had DJ Shockley, of course, played at Georgia and Atlanta. Another, again, just a good, strong believer in Christ. Daniel Ritchie. Daniel Ritchie was the young man who was born with no arms.
Yeah.
And God has done a work in his life. And Pastor actually saw him on Fox News and thought, man, we got to get this guy here. So Dr. McKinley just picked up the phone and called him. And he was able to come. Dr. Charles Lowery, who is if you're around Southern Baptist life, you know Dr. Lowery. He's a comedian, former pastor, and is just fantastic. A guy named Scott Turner. Scott is a former NFL. I think he played 12 years in the league, and then he worked with the NFL Players Association. Then under Donald Trump's, when he was president, he worked with Ben Carson and HUD, and he's now back at Prestonwood pastoring. He was just a fantastic speaker. Jonathan Evans, the son of Dr. Tony Evans. Jonathan was he played in the NFL, but then he's currently the chaplain for the Dallas Cowboys. Pastor Dave Stone, Coach Mark Richt came 2 years ago and was phenomenal. I really enjoyed getting to know him. Fire Chief Kelvin Cochran, he was the fire chief in Atlanta. And
what a guy.
Oh my gosh.
That was the first year I went.
He floored me.
Yeah. Incredible story of talk about persecution for doing the right thing.
Yeah.
I mean, that guy, unbelievable. He walks the walk and he walks the talk, if you will. Coach Shane Beamer was there with us last year, Dr. Robert Morgan. And then I'm really excited this year. This year's lineup may not be the most well-known, if you will, in that outside of church circles, if you will. Obviously, David Pollock, everybody knows, of course, from Georgia knows David Pollock. I tell you what, that's a young man who God is using. I've seen him speak on a number of different occasions. He is anointed of the Lord. Obviously, phenomenal football player. All SEC. Unbelievable how many records he holds. But of course, it was first round draft pick, was sadly injured his second year, but I believe the Lord is using him in a mighty way. Pastor Dr. Crawford Laritz, who I'm really excited for Dr. Laritz to be here. He pastors a church in Atlanta, and he's been a featured speaker at Super Bowls, the NCAA Final Four, chapel. He's spoken at the Pentagon. He's currently the senior pastor at Fellowship Bible Church in Roswell, Georgia. Pastor Don Wilton. Dr. Wilton is a South African, and he's known as Billy Graham's pastor. He is a long-time, I think 30-plus years at First Baptist Church Spartanburg. He's currently also the associate pastor for evangelistic preaching at New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary. I've heard him speak. Matter of fact, before we did our conference, we flew out back in 2016 to Prestonwood, where they do a men's conference. Dr. McKinley was speaking there, and I heard Dr. Wilton preach. Phenomenal communicator. So really excited for him to be here. And then Pastor Philip DeCourcy. Pastor DeCourcy is out of California. He's actually from Belfast, Ireland, but he pastors a church in California. He also has a national radio broadcast. It's called Know the Truth. It's heard on more than 600 radio stations in the U.S., as well as a bunch of digital platforms. But I'm really looking forward to having Pastor DeCourcy. He'll actually be with us. Of course, he'll speak Saturday. Then he's actually going to stay over and preach for us Sunday morning. And then Pastor Dan Coleman. Pastor Coleman is one of the pastors. We have a connection with from Augusta, Georgia to Augusta, Maine. He pastors a church in Augusta, Maine. Of course, Jesse's gotten to know him really well. He's the lead pastor of Central Church, which is a multi-site church based out of Augusta, Maine. And there, it's so different. That's not the Bible Belt, man. It's not even close to the Bible Belt. And so for him there, he's leading a church of over 2,000 members. That's an anomaly. I mean, here in the South, that's not a big deal. Yeah. But up there, I think I saw a statistic that 1% claim Christianity in Augusta, Maine. I mean, that's like a third world country. But God is using that man, and he's just doing a great work up there. So we just want to continue to support him. But an incredible preacher, a great evangelist. So I'm really excited about him being a part of our lineup as well.
Yeah. What's like the I remember from the other 2 years that I've been there, 22 and 23, there's like themes or topics. What's this year's? Follow.
Yeah, it's follow. And again, so Dr. McKinley, of course, is speaking on that at Men's Forum leading up to it. So follow.
Awesome. I'm so pumped.
And, and just hearing those numbers like with Dan, I don't think there's anything that, at least that you and I come in contact with, Lane, when we were in Maine year one, there's probably not many organizations of 2,000 people.
No.
Period.
Yeah.
But yet in one of the least churched communities, you have that congregation, and of course I could do it in an entire podcast about our experiences in Maine, because it's just so special. And to me, it's on that mission mission mindset that, we can talk about all this stuff till we're blue in the face, but it's going to take some people, just as uncomfortable as it is from time to time, just stepping outside that comfort zone and just doing it. And I understand that a lot of the things that we do with Man to Man are a lot of pastors. And now if people will just keep an open mind and they come and listen, it is amazing when you have good communicators, how personal their stories become. Mr. Cochran was something that I don't know why it just, we were in a very tumultuous time,
right,
in our communities within, with the police forces and fire, and, there's a lot going on. And, he was just he was enlightening.
Yeah. Talk about a man who stood for something
against a lot of his own people. He's standing up against his own people, being ridiculed by everybody because he had one intention. His one intention was to please one person, and that's the Father. And so to me, I talk to a lot of people that, we might consider non-churched and, good friends of mine. I have to, they're very good friends of mine. It's going to take one, because I'm telling you, without this foundation, I hate to say it, but I've got nothing in my tool belt aside from great friendship and love and support. But there's no tools that I feel like will benefit people until you get this foundation.
It's the game changer.
And I'm telling you, I have tried every other explanation and every other method to be fulfilled, to be satisfied, to feel like I was playing a role. And until you get out, and I know it sounds like I'm preaching to people, and I don't intend to do that, but I just want to save somebody some time.
Come on.
And it is, you're going to end up where we are.
Yeah. I don't want this episode to sound like it's so like dramatic and melancholic and like we're dragging men. I'm super hopeful. I think right now we're specifically at a time where there's such a craving for meaning, and where you find that meaning, people searching for God. And this is where it's challenging because social media, you get a lot of maybe incorrect theologies and practices being kind of pushed out there. But I do think that there's a deep craving for meaning, especially amongst young men, because we've been so ostracized and I don't know if this is a bad word, bastardized. Is that like a bad word? I don't even know.
I know.
Like basically like we're the black sheep
accurate.
now.
Yeah.
You've become such like the black sheep. And I think that young men are starting to really want that attention again, or that meaning. And I think that's evident in Maine. I mean, like you said, 2,000 people. in such an unchurched and maybe atheistic culture. I mean, 2000, that to me, that's like, I'm so hopeful now in just hearing that.
And it is, the thing that just shocks me when we go, I think that why I'm so passionate about Maine, there's nothing, outside of a couple little cities there that have been absolutely destroyed, but there's not a lot there. There's not a lot going on. And then there's places that, I look in Maine, and when we go and see nothing but just, I'm enamored by the beauty of Maine.
Yeah.
It is such a rich historical area. Our founding fathers, there's so much that has happened starting up there in the Northeast.
Mm-hmm.
And being kind of a history buff, it was just shocking to me that in a time that our country was founded on principles that originated from in that area geographically, and to see how far that they have come in terms of just turning that entire place upside down is mind-boggling to me. And now I feel like, to your point, Mike, I feel like people have had enough. They're fed up with it. Because I can tell you, we've got some history that we can look back on doing it the way that the world's doing it right now. Are you seeing in schools what you thought you were going to see by removing any sort of biblical teaching whatsoever? Does what you're seeing taught now, are you seeing statistics and data to prove that was a good decision? I don't think you are.
Right.
There's a lot of other areas that if we just look at it and say, well, okay, we have been operating it the way that you wanted operated for however long. Have you got the data to prove that this was a positive, or are we going forward, or are we going backwards? Which way are we going? And so that's, to me, probably what I lay my head down each night and just goes through my head over and over again. Like, who can honestly say that, based on the changes that have been made, that we've witnessed, is it pointing us in a direction that we feel that as a community we're drawing closer together? And that goes for everything that we talk about here with the divisiveness and that lack of inclusiveness. And since we're not outside playing like we used to when we were kids, we handled the bullies. The bullies got dealt with out there. Right. They could bully for a while, but then you realize that there's always one tougher. And then, of course, as soon as you found that one tougher, you brought him over and introduced him to the bully. And shockingly enough, it ended that bullying.
Yeah.
But since we've eliminated a lot of that interaction that we've all had together playing, it's just, we haven't, we didn't have an answer for what we were going to eliminate this far. They thought it would be technology, but, a lot of these mass shootings, I don't know of any other situation where I would have thought, there's nothing I played when I played cops and robbers and whatever, that I was trying to take out an entire bank. I just wanted to tell her, and I want the money. Nowadays, it's the whole bank. I want to shoot that whole block up. And it's that different mentality. But if you play the games that we are allowing our children to play, they're real.
Yeah.
I heard the other day, and I don't know this to be true. Y'all don't quote me on this, but I heard one of the games, they had a literal gentleman's club that you can earn the right to go in there.
This is like a video game?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's got to be like Grand Theft Auto or Sims or something like that.
Yeah, that's the one. And looking at it from the outside, it's like, man, the all of the image. What do you call that? Imagery? Animation.
Yeah,
like that. All of that looks so realistic, and I thought, man, that would be an awesome game to play. I played Tecmo Bowl, and I played the little, the pixel guys, and so now it's so realistic. I can see where it's everything to the eye that would strike a chord. But then they got to sneak into that game as and that's something you have to earn. I don't know. Just think about that a little bit.
Yeah. Real briefly, Jesse, what was it about the man-to-man conference? Obviously, it sounds like Jesse had some sort of influence in the creation of this. But regardless of the fact you've been a sponsor of the event since it started, what has drawn you to this event?
I think a loving challenge. If you're going to speak this stuff and you're going to speak it out, then, I run in a circle of men that will very lovingly tell you, put your money where your mouth is. Mm. Show us that this means a lot, because there's everybody out there preaching that it means something to them. But when it comes down to it, the days of planning and all of that, are you willing to do what it takes? Because we need help with this. Now, we want to do this and we love the ideas, but we need some facilitators. But I think it's birthed from originally a passion for men, because I lived a long time on the wrong side of this whole fence. And then I got to a point that I was just broken, and didn't know what to do. And there was nothing I could buy to make me feel better. It didn't matter. Money didn't matter. And it just takes one person that, or one situation that caused me to realize and see real quickly that it's simple. You've been making this so complicated. And I guess because after experiencing that myself, it wasn't a question of whether or not I'd be willing to do it. And it wasn't never a question to me of whether or not we would, play a role. Mm-hmm. It was just when, and given the opportunity. And also, with my wife being so supportive, because she in turn, she got the husband that that's who she wanted the whole time. That's what and obviously I was a believer prior to she and I, but I was not acting out my faith. I had fire insurance at that point. And I knew it had to be more than fire insurance. And it wasn't until I started putting my boots on the ground and serving that I started realizing, the meaning behind, the desires of my heart.
Yeah.
And how am I going to get that mean I'm going to have a Lambo and I'm going to have all this? Cool. I'm going to pray for that real quick so we'll take the Lambo somewhere. You just have no idea. And I'm passionate about it because I want other men to feel that.
Yeah.
I just want to share it. I mean, I think it's somehow become a secret that we've been keeping. I don't think it's been intentionally, but I think unintentionally we've been keeping the secret because we've used the wrong types of communicators, the wrong methods to do that. We've been browbeating men instead of loving them. And now that we've got our opportunity, we had a clean slate to where we can create it in a manner that a collective group of men could come up with ways to draw more men, like-minded men, give them the opportunity to experience that. And I remember Melissa and I praying about if we just had more time, we would serve more. Well, then we started having time and we were scared to death not to serve because we made that commitment.
Right.
And then we're investing in men with our company and with our brand. And that's what we're going to continue to do. And this is not tooting Kings Creek's horn. It was a conscious effort and an intention. And then being paired with the church that is forward-minded. We make mistakes. Trust me. We do a lot of things that we wish we'd have done differently, but we're not afraid. We've got a large enough group of men that aren't afraid to just give something a shot.
Yeah. And
that's what I want to associate with as a brand and as a human. I can't associate with things as a human and not carry it into my brand, because it's a reflection of us. So I quite honestly didn't have a choice.
Yeah. I've always been very thankful of that within your brand, as I've noticed that if it's not something that you don't align with, you just won't be a part of it. And it is what it is. Even if there's money to be made, you're like, nah, it's kind of like blood money, so to speak.
It's tough.
Not good money.
And that's the toughest thing that we do on a day-to-day basis. Mm-hmm. It's got to be something that we believe in, but it means something to us seeing people align with our brand and that means a lot. I mean, my goodness, what an honor it is to have people wanting to buy stuff that you create. I mean, it's the most humbling thing you can do because we're just such normal people. But I think that God has chosen to give us a whatever size platform you want to call it. It could look large or small. But I think he's done obviously we don't deserve it, but since we have been given that opportunity, we just want to take advantage of it.
Yeah. Alrighty. I think we could probably have this conversation for another 4 hours if we wanted to, but I think it's time we kind of put this conversation to bed. That said,
but before we get too far away, I do want to do this. Lane hadn't always been doing what he's doing now.
Oh yeah. I heard some things about you.
Yeah.
Young sir.
I want to hear a little bit about, if you want to shoot some stats out there, he would never do this. He'd be embarrassed. But I would like to hear a little bit about your high school powerlifting, about your coaching experience, and what transitioned you, or how you transitioned from that to what you do now.
Sure. Well, right out of high school, I played small college football. Grew up in Florida. I wasn't a Division I athlete. I was not good enough. And back then it was Florida, Florida State, Miami. And I wasn't going to play at any of those schools. UCF was Division I AA back when they had that. I wasn't even good enough to play there. But I did get a scholarship to play NAIA, small college football, NAIA football up in Athens, West Virginia. I played for Concord College back then. It's Concord University now. So went there, was there 5 years. I was redshirted my first year, played, had a great time, had just a wonderful experience. Met my wife. So in 1989, we graduated, both of us, and moved back to Florida, both of us with teaching degrees. So I began teaching and coaching at the high school I graduated from, Spruce Creek High School. Started off coaching the ninth grade football team, and I did that for a number of years. Then I moved and I was the assistant weightlifting coach. In Florida, they had weightlifting as a sport. Great obviously weightlifting off-season program for all athletics, but so we had weightlifting teams, and it just kept kids interested in lifting weights. So as a high school football player and weightlifter, I lifted on the weightlifting team, and in 1984 I won a state championship. Back then we did this clean and jerk and bench press, and so I won a state championship as an athlete. Then went away to college, came back, started coaching and teaching. Was the assistant coach on the weightlifting team with my former head coach Dave Ramey, who is one of the best men I've ever met. Was coaching football as well. Eventually became the defensive coordinator on the football team. Coach Ramey retired. I became the head weightlifting coach. So I taught and coached for a total of 13 years, and had great success. Our weightlifting team, at this point, I think now they've won 22 state championships. I was a part of two as a lifter, and then as a assistant coach, I was a part of 3. And then when I became the head coach, praise the Lord, we won. I was a head coach for 7 years, and we won 7 state championships. And so it was pretty cool.
It's not a bad record.
Well, it was amazing. It was a great program, and I had just some incredible kids. So coaching football and coaching weightlifting, I had the dream job. I taught 6 classes of weightlifting a day. We had an incredible facility. It was important there. Yeah. And so there was a lot of funding and just an incredible facility. And that's what I thought I was going to do forever. And I was I sponsored Fellowship of Christian Athletes. That's how I came to know Christ. I wasn't raised in a Christian home. My parents were not believers, and my parents were divorced. I came from a divorced home, but long story short, got involved in Fellowship of Christian Athletes as an athlete. Came to know Christ at Black Mountain, North Carolina, at their FCA camp, and so became a sponsor of that. So I was doing that, man. I was doing my thing. My wife was teaching. I was teaching. Then my wife stayed home. Once we had started having kids, she stayed home. I continued to teach and coach. And I was a member at First Baptist Church, Daytona Beach. And there we had an associate pastor named David Fleming. And a few years after I went on set, well, long story short, David was the associate pastor there with Dr. Bobby Welch. And we were good. We were friends. He's just a year older than I am, and we just hit it off. Just a great guy. So I was again teaching and coaching, did my thing. Thought I was going to do that for the next 30 years and retire at 53. Well, the Lord started changing that in my life. I didn't know what a call to ministry was. Loved the Lord, loved serving Him, but I thought that's what I was doing. I was coaching and teaching, and my sponsor in FCA. I was, honestly, I was preaching the gospel to kids. I had athletes get saved, and I thought, well, this is great. But then the Lord just began to just kind of change my heart again. So my wife and I prayed about that. I remember praying for over a year, Lord, what are you doing here? So I thought, well, is He calling me to go into administration, or is He calling me to go in and try to teach or coach at a college level? Well, none of that ever panned out. No opportunities whatsoever. And so out of the blue, David Fleming came to me and said, "Hey, man, what does your future hold for you?" I said, "David, it's funny you ask. I don't know. I mean, I thought I was going to do this forever, but the Lord's been doing something." He said, "Well, the Lord's been stirring in my heart as well. Would you ever think about coming on staff at First Baptist Daytona?" I said, "I got a PE degree, David." And he said, "Well, it's a calling, not an education, but you'll want to get your education if the Lord's calling you to this." So we began praying about that for about 6 months, and the Lord made it very clear that's what I needed to do. So in 2001, I resigned at the end of the year, I resigned and went on staff at First Baptist Church, Daytona Beach, as the young and median adult pastor. Actually, as a director, I wasn't ordained at that point. Started going to seminary. Now, this was a long time ago, back when seminary, Liberty University was one of the only distant learning seminaries out there. And so they literally sent me VHS tapes, and I would sit in front of the TV and watch VHS tapes. That's how I went to school. So I did that, got my seminary degree. Within that time, about 6-8 months into my time there at First Daytona, David took a job at Warren Baptist Church in Augusta, Georgia. And so I remember that was a moment, because I really was connected with David, and I started thinking, gosh, what the heck happened here? I've quit my job that I was really successful at. I've moved over in this other area to partner with this guy. But the Lord solidified my call to ministry at that point. Whenever, I just remember, I've never heard the audible voice of the Lord, but when David left, I was in a kind of a funk. I'll be honest with you. I was thinking, dang, what's going on here? But I sensed the Lord say, look, I've called you to follow me, not David Fleming. And so I stayed at Daytona for another 4 years and was doing ministry and involved there. And then David called and said, "Hey, would you ever think about relocating?" And there was an opportunity here at Warren. And so I came, and we prayed about that, and it went through the whole search process, and we took about a year, and then we came up here. I came up to Warren Baptist as a young immediate adult pastor once again. And 6 months later, David went to Texas. So I thought, I was thinking, what the heck, man? Is there something about me? And he asked me to go. And I went out there and went through the whole process as well in Texas, and just could not get a peace about it. And the only peace I got was when I said, "David, I don't think I'm supposed to go." And that was great. We still remain great friends today. But so I stayed at Warren Baptist. And so grateful, because 2 years later, Dr. McKinley came. And that's just talking about a man's man. He's a man's man, and just a great guy that I want to follow. I'm grateful for his leadership. So I stayed there. And when he came on staff, I shifted over to a role called spiritual formations pastor. A lot of churches call it minister of education. So I served there for a number of years. And then 3 years ago, when Dr. Steve White retired, he was our executive pastor. Dr. McKinley asked me to move over. And so I became the executive pastor 3 years ago.
Awesome.
So that's how we got to this point.
Yeah. Talk about a man's man. That Pastor McKinley has a vice grip handshake.
Doesn't he, though? And they'll pull you in, too.
It's impressive. Oh, yeah.
It is very impressive.
Grip and yank.
Love it.
I told him, I said, you're already the guy.
He gives you a nice pat on the back. That's more like a beat on the back.
Man,
love him.
And he'll scrub them whiskers on you, too, and love on you. I mean, and he means it. But he's so impressive. And all of you guys are, and the fluidity. And I'd be, very naive to say that there was not some things that obviously are not always perfect.
Sure.
There's always going to be that transition from time to time, but if you have an opportunity to visit us at Warren, it is, I think it's something that should hit a little bit different.
Yeah. Oh, it did for me. 100%. Good. I'm not going to mention the church I came out of, but coming in here, I'm like immediately knew, like, oh yeah, this is where I'm supposed to be. This is my church home.
I felt that way too.
Mike, you said just a few minutes ago that, we almost kind of like sound like this is a downer. I agree. This isn't, man. I am concerned, but I'm encouraged.
Right.
The fact that we had 306 men at a men's breakfast this morning at 6:30. So, and then we had another 35 or 40 over at Belvedere, because Pastor Stephen Newman at Warren Belvedere is doing a men's breakfast over there as well. So, praise God that you guys thought this topic important enough to put a whole podcast into it. I believe God is working and moving, and I believe man-to-man conference is one of those ways that He's doing it. And so I am concerned, but I'm also excited, because I agree with you, Mike. I think especially young men, I think they're desiring truth. They want truth, man, without any mixture of error, without any of the fluff. They just want to know the stuff. And I just believe that those of us who are followers of Christ, we got to be willing to lead them. We got to be willing to walk alongside of them, man, and disciple them. I think a lot of the problem is not a lot of men have been discipled, so they don't know how to disciple. But because it's messy, it takes time. You got to walk alongside another man.
Yeah.
And but what greater thing can we do? Because I think that's how it's going to change, is one-on-one, man, and just continuing to do that. And this is a passage of scripture that I don't know, just really sticks out to me. It's 1 Corinthians 16:13, and it's about what we're talking about. It says, "Be watchful, stand firm in the faith, act like men, be strong." Man, that's what we need. That's it.
Yeah.
There you go.
That's an order.
Boom.
And
I agree.
how do you argue that? I don't know.
Yep.
But I am extremely encouraged because I know just the over the past 5-6 years that we've been a part of Man to Man, we've been fortunate. We've been now we weren't promised this, but we've been blessed with seeing the fruits of a lot of this labor, and then getting to witness the transformation of so many men. And then the wives, you hear from the wives afterwards.
Yeah.
That, they have tried everything in the world, to get through to these men. I'm going to tell you, it's a sad society when a woman can't get through to a man. I mean, it's sad. I mean, what are you doing? I mean, so
yeah,
I am encouraged as well. I'm always excited when this happens. And when it gets to this time of year, because I do know that, we'll get to ride on that high for a while, and there's going to be some men that come out of this changed. And I mean, I just, if this doesn't, man used to tell me, if this don't light your fire, your wood's wet. And there's a lot of truth in that.
Interesting. I like that expression. All right, so let's put this conversation to bed. Lane, why don't you kind of basically tell people how they can find the conference or how they can join us there, and then any final thoughts you may have.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, you can just go to warren.church/men's conference. And right there are all the details. It'll be Friday, March 8th, 5:30 to 9:15 p.m. And then Saturday, March 9th, 8 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. Tickets are $25, but that includes a great barbecue dinner on Friday night and then full country-style breakfast on Saturday morning, along with just 6 dynamic speakers. I'm really excited about that. So you can swing by the church and pick it up if you need to buy, a ticket that way. But online is the easiest, quickest thing you can do.
All right. Are tickets available at the door? Just out of curiosity?
Will not be. No,
they
sir.
will not be. All right.
And
so,
honestly, we're running. I mean, we're about to cut it off. We're almost at maximum, occupancy right now. And I just want to say, Jesse, thank you for partnering with us for so long. And you have put your money where your mouth is, man. And I know that's not what you want me to say today, but I'm just really grateful because Kings Creek has been our title event sponsor since the inception of the event. And that you guys come full force and you serve so well, and we could not do this conference without you. So I really, really appreciate you, and I appreciate you leading your company to do this.
We couldn't do it any other way.
Amen.
Period.
All right. Well, that's it for me. Lane, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to come join us and talk about an encouraging and important topic. And we'll see where this leads us. Hopefully we see everyone listening at Man to Man Conference. So that's it.
I think it's going to be awesome. And hopefully we might even get the opportunity I might be speaking a little prematurely, but we're going to try to possibly do a little recording while we're there.
Yeah.
Talking to a couple of people. I would love to be able to revisit this and get some feedback from some people and to let everybody know that we dipped our toes in the water and it didn't kill us.
Amen.
Man on the street style. So, alrighty. Well, again, thank you so much for your time, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
A spray painted line on the west end of Main Street. Up to that night, my 85 and never been beat.
All right, guys, that's a wrap. Thank you so much for listening. If you would please leave us a review and a rating, that is how we get the word out about this podcast. And lastly, go check us out at Kings Creek Apparel. Thank you.